So your resume is like a brochure for an employer to decide if they like you enough to invite you for an interview. So a good resume, of course, doesn't necessarily make a great candidate, but what it does is it increases your chances of landing an interview, which is obviously what you want. So as a recruiter, I am privileged to see hundreds of resumes on a consistent basis, and I have seen many good resumes, I've seen many bad resumes, and I'd like to share with you some tips to improve your resume. So whether you have a resume prepared already or if you're just about to prepare one, these tips will be very helpful. So we'll talk about three things. We'll talk about layout and formatting for your resume, how to make sure that your resume is easy on the eye, easy to read, and how long your resume should be. We'll also talk about consistent progression, which is basically telling the story to an employee about the career growth and the path you've taken so far. And last but not the least, we'll talk about showing stability and basically showing an employer that you're very reliable. So layout and formatting. So the first thing that a hiring manager will see is the layout and formatting of your resume. Is the first thing they will see. So a good layout is easy to read and invites anyone to spend more time looking at your resume, which is obviously what you want. So how can you have a good layout? The first thing is do not be shy about using white spaces. So leave blank spaces between various sections and use at least 1-inch margins. So if your resume is very clear and there's lots of spaces in between, it's easier to read. So only use 2 types of fonts. If you use more than 2 types of fonts, your resume looks very clumsy and it's harder to read and harder to follow along, and it's just very distracting. Also, avoid underlined sentences. So underlined sentences is just very distracting, so try and avoid those as much as possible. Use bold and italics sparingly, so use them as less often as possible. Again, these are things that really distract and you don't want that on your resume. Also be consistent. So if you're using capital letters to describe the names of employers, have that consistently throughout your resume. You don't want to have different variations of formatting to describe different things in your resume. That just is not good. I recommend using bullet points. So under each roles, have 3 to 4 bullet points that outline your key responsibilities and your key accomplishments, what you've done and what you're proud of at each role. And the reason why I recommend bullet points is because bullet points are very easy to digest and it won't look like you're rambling, which really distracts if you don't have bullet points. Also, list your work experiences with the most recent position at the top of the list and then make your way down that way. Also, make sure that your resume is only at most 2 pages long. Honestly, if a hiring manager is looking at hundreds of resumes and they see a resume that is 3 or 4 or 5 pages long, it's really not that attractive. It just shows that you can't put things in concise words. And honestly, like if I was a hiring manager, I would struggle to read 3 or 4 pages of resume. Second thing is consistent progression. So showing consistency and progression in your career demonstrates to employers that you really care about your career growth. And how can you show career progression? The first thing is to separate all the different roles you've held at the same company. So if you started out as a sales associate, for example, and you're now a sales manager, break that down and show how you've grown in your career. That really makes a lot of difference. Also, show how your key responsibilities and accomplishments have changed as you've grown and progressed in your career. That goes a long way. Also, explain any reasons for backward moves in your career. So for example, if you left a senior role due to family or health issues, explain that, and that gives an employer some context as to why you left a role that you were doing pretty well at. Also, the last thing we'll talk about is showing stability. So employers are looking for reliable and stable people. If you are a job hopper and you've just moved jobs so many times, employers will be reluctant to hire you just because they are not sure if you're going to stick around, and they don't want to put that investment in you if you're just going to leave fairly soon. So how can you show stability in your job, in your resume? Share reasons for leaving a position, especially if you've been there for less than a year. So, for example, if you left a job due to toxic work culture or health issues, or for any other reasons that you might leave a job, explain the reasons for leaving the job. If it's a layoff, if it's due to family issues, explain that in your resume. That will go a long way to building trust. Also, do not include work experience that is less than 2 months long, especially if they did not provide any tangible skill or experience for you. It just makes your resume looks more clumsy, and it just paints a bad picture if you do that. Also, if many of your work experience are over 2 years long, I actually recommend that you list them by years and exclude the months. So it's better to include, if you worked at Google for 2 years between 2005 and 2007, it's easier and just more easy to read if you include 2005 to 2007 as opposed to including the months, January 2005 to February 2007. It just makes things look a little bit clumsy. So I hope these are very helpful tips for you. Feel free to send me your resume actually. So one of the things I'm happy to do is look at your resume, give you some feedback, and share with you some recommendations. And also one of the things we'll be doing in subsequent section is to go through what an ideal resume look like, and also go through what a pretty bad resume look like, and then you can see some of the differences.